I don't know what to feel with compassion. How does that feel? How does it differentiate? Or what is the difference between compassion and loving kindness? Well, essentially one could say that one needs to feel it in order to know it. One's got to bite into the mango to know what it tastes like. It's not possible to understand through words what a feeling is like. If one has never fallen in love, how is one going to explain what that feels like? But if one has fallen in love, one doesn't have to explain anything. It's the same with that, with compassion. But there is a difference, maybe I can say that much, between loving kindness and compassion. Loving kindness or lovingness is a feeling of warmth and embracing, and a feeling of having a deep connection. And compassion may be described more as an understanding of dukkha in oneself and others, and therefore feeling the empathy with the other person, also with oneself, and very often the possibility of soothing the dukkha. But essentially, one needs to bite into the mango. And with practice, one can do it. It's a learning experience, and it takes time. It's not immediate. If somebody is caught in past, it's a hard one. How am I going to translate that? If somebody is in the present, is caught in the a prison of past educational experiences, and it is necessary to change this prison, or to open the prison up so that one can get near to one's body sensations, and if metta, loving kindness, and intermittent insights do not help, what else can one do? It's very complicated German. I have to reread it. Talks about a corset. Yes, I think from the wording in this question that it points directly at the method which we did today. The part by part, over and over again. Because that is exactly what will help to loosen and to soften the experiences that we have, so that we can actually bear them, because we don't get near them because they're not very pleasant. So that particular method is the best one for this particular problem. And one other reminder: nothing in the world is a substitute for actual practice. You can think and think and think and think and understand, but without the practice, nothing happens. Nothing at all. So doing it is the main thing that we can possibly help ourselves. And when we help ourselves, we help the world. That's a nice thought, isn't it? Could you please explain the meaning of rebirth dash samsara? What is it that's going to be reborn? Energy? No. What's being reborn are karmic resultants. And the word samsara are the rounds of birth and death. And yes, one can put the two together, rebirth. But samsara is actually the worldly experience of birth and death and all that in between. It's also samsara. And energy, yeah, well, it's a dicey word. Nobody knows exactly what it is, do we? That's energy, there, the lamp. No, it's the karmic resultants that are being reborn. Is it all right to recall the feeling of unconditional love for a beloved one who is dead already? Doesn't it mean attachment to a memory to the past? Or can this love affect the energy of this former person in a good way? There we go again with energy. A word that is not ever very clear. It's fine to recall the feeling of unconditional love for a beloved person if it was really unconditional love. It's unusual and highly unlikely. Unconditional love is something one's got to learn. Nobody does that just like that, without having a lot of experience and a lot of learning. But whether it's unconditional love or just love doesn't matter. If there is a real feeling for the person that is already dead, but the love feeling is there, it's fine to use that to, first of all, to use it in order to give it as a gift to others. And secondly, if we bring it up and extend it to the person that's dead, it may have a very good effect for that person. It may. When we kill an animal for food or a tree for wood, I assume it is craving that we want the food or the wood or whatever. If we bring gratitude to our hearts for the being to be killed and what it will provide for us, is this a good idea? Some cultures have rituals like this. Yes, it's a very good idea. In fact, it's a very good idea to be grateful when we cut a lettuce in the garden. It doesn't even have to be an animal. It can be as little as a radish. And you pull it out of the earth and put gratitude in your heart that it has grown for your nourishment. Yes, of course, one can put it under craving, the food or the tree for the house to build. But as long as we have bodies, so long we will kill. There's no way around it. If you even just think of the bacteria that sometimes beset us and we have to take medicine or do something to get rid of them, or our food that we do need to stay alive. So as long as there's a body, there will be also that. It's a natural way that nature works, and we're part of that nature. But being grateful is a very good idea. It seems that in Buddhist countries people are not so afraid of death, but more of a bad rebirth. Many people who are now dying from AIDS believe they will be reborn as a pig or a dog. If they have been involved in prostitution, homosexuality, etc., what can we tell them to help them deal with this problem? The problem being, apparently, that they're thinking that they're going to get a bad rebirth. This being reborn as a pig or a dog is not very Western, is it? It's more an idea that we find in Asia. And We can tell them that it depends entirely on their intentions that they've had. And if the intentions have not been harmful to others, then there's no reason why they can't be reborn as a human being. And also, they're still, while they're still alive, there's still time to make good karma. I don't know if Westerners have also this kind of fear, even if they're Buddhist. If they don't, it may mean that their belief in reincarnation is not very deep, but rather intellectual. Possibly. It's not that easy to distinguish between what people think intellectually and what they really have as a feeling. In the West, people don't really believe that they can be reborn as pigs or dogs. And in fact, maybe rebirth is not very clear. So the fear of a bad rebirth may be much more noticeable in Asia, and in the West, more the fear of death. Both need to be worked on, whichever fear one has. Any fear is detrimental to one's happiness, and any fear is negative. So whatever we fear, we should let go of it. Do dreams count as a valid means of self-discovery? Psychiatry uses them, but are they appropriate for our path? The Buddha did not explain dreams as a rule. There are two instances in all of the discourses where he explained dreams. And one of the instances, the reason for the explanation, was the fact that the king who had had the dream thought that in the meaning was that he should go to war. And so the Buddha stopped him from that. And the other time, the Buddha explained that the dream concerned the dead relatives that need to be helped. The only times, those two times, that he talked about dreams. So at other times there was nothing to be found. If a dream quite obviously shows something that is very, very much connected with oneself, whether one looks that way one looks now or looks entirely different. Usually one looks entirely different. It doesn't matter. But if it's really connected with oneself, and it doesn't take a great deal of imagination to figure out what it means, I personally would say, personal opinion, that one can use it. But if one needs a lot of imagination, I think one shouldn't try, because the imagination will be going totally the wrong way. Is ego the same as self? Yes, it is. Just another word. Which connection do they have to consciousness? Well, they have a very intrinsic connection. They color everything that we are conscious of. It's me being conscious. That's what me and self are doing. I think we should practice rather than try and figure that one out. Today, while sitting, I had an insight into sex. I used to think that sex was wonderful, necessary, and that orgasm was the momentary liberation of ego. Yeah, I've read that somewhere too. The more sex I had, the more powerful I felt. the craving for sex is nothing but the craving for an I or me. After all that sensation must be happening to someone. Please comment on the Buddha's teaching on this subject. Well, there are two kinds of teaching on that subject. One concerns monks and nuns and their celibate. On the spiritual path, if one takes it absolutely seriously and is determined to get to Nibbana, celibacy is necessary. And not only in the Buddha's path, in any spiritual path that takes their spirituality seriously enough to come either to Nibbana or the God experience or whatever one likes to call it. Then there's another way of looking at it, and from the Buddha, and that is for householders. Sex is perfectly legitimate, belongs to a householder's life, but it should be done within the family. Very simple. If we do good deeds because we hope for good karma, rather than because we want to do them from our own inner sense of generosity, morality, loving kindness, or empathy, are we not, in a sense, doing it for gain? And then, wouldn't there be attachment and craving? And then, can't there attachment craving for good karma? Can't quite make it out, but it says, and then, isn't there, maybe like that, isn't there attachment and craving, and maybe not good karma? Well, it's quite true. If we do good deeds because we want to make good karma, it is not quite as ideal as doing good deeds because we feel the sense of generosity. But it's certainly much better than not doing them. So it's just a matter of various levels. In fact, some people, especially in the East, do good deeds to make merit. Make merit is also making good karma, but make merit for their next life. Well, that's certainly trying to gain something by it, but it's still much better than not doing it. And if one has done the good deeds long enough, because one wants to make good karma, eventually it's a habit, and one is searching for opportunities to do good deeds. I'll just read out the part of this which is the question. The rest is just explanation. Why is the present moment very often experienced as not enough? Always this craving for a peak experience. Not necessarily peak. The present moment is very often experienced as not enough because the mind has not been trained to stay in the moment. When the mind is trained to stay in the moment, each moment is a peak experience. We don't need anything else. That's it. And we have had that experience on various occasions. Everybody has had. If something is really interesting, or we meet a person whom we feel really in sympathy with, and there is a very interesting conversation, or we see a wonderful sunset, then we are in that moment and we feel really at ease, and we may feel quite full of joy because we are right there. But if the moment is apparently not terribly interesting, the mind isn't trained well enough. It's just a matter of training, that's all. It's a matter of time. Patience is one of the 10 virtues. I know of a meditation teacher well known in California. Where else? Who mainly uses the prayers and sayings of saints from various traditions. During meditation, these prayers are repeated over and over again. Isn't this contemplation rather than meditation? Well, there are two ways of using prayer. One can be contemplation, one can be meditation. If we use the prayers or the sayings as far as their content goes and try to understand that content and go deeply into it, then it's contemplation. But then again, various spiritual disciplines use the words contemplation and meditation interchangeably. We are using it that way. So if there are prayers and sayings and we want to know what they're all about, what does it mean, then it's contemplation. But we can also use silent prayer. If the prayers are repeated and maybe the mind, which was something that was asked about a mantra already, and the mind eventually latches on to that prayer and repeats it silently, not verbally, but just silently, it can very well lead to the first meditative absorption. And then it's meditation. The Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks about dreadful bardo conditions, near-death experiences with awful pictures, but they are not often published. Is there a way to experience death in peace if we only practice very little? And I think that 1 hour a day is very little. Well, how about 2 or 3 hours then? Might be a great help. And as I said before, those visions that come from different cultures are not necessarily the visions that we would have. They're very culturally and socially imbued with what one has seen and known during this lifetime. In fact, they are totally colored by that. So the bardo conditions are not necessarily valid for Westerners. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be very unpleasant near-death experiences. Certainly there could be, depending who's got it. And in order to practice means all our waking hours. Practice does not mean sitting on a pillow. Sitting on a pillow can be meditation, can be contemplation, it can be sleepiness, it can be fantasizing, it can be anything. Trance, whatever. Practice is something entirely different. There are 24 hours in a day, of which we might sleep, let's say, 7, which leaves us with 17 hours each day. Naturally, if we practice only 1 hour, it's not enough. It's not enough to lead a spiritual life. It's not enough to have spiritual growth. But there are very few people in the world who can sit on a pillow for 17 hours a day, if any. It's highly unlikely. But there are many people in the world who can practice for 17 hours a day. We have to distinguish between the word practice and the word sitting in meditation. Naturally, our practice needs the meditation, but meditation is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. And there is never a course that misunderstanding does not have to be cleared up and then reappears in the next course. Practice means substituting the unwholesome for the wholesome, watching one's emotions, watching one's thoughts, trying to lessen the egocentricity of knowing more, of knowing better, of being right, the egocentricity of wanting one's own way. All that is practice. Meditation is part of it. And if we don't have meditation as a support system, it's very difficult to lessen egocentricity. But practice is 17 hours a day, and any time we meet a person, we practice loving kindness and compassion. And as we do that, loving kindness and compassion gets anchored in the heart, and we don't even have to practice. It's there. Well, that's the practice path. So whether the bardo has any bearing on our death experience or not, our practice in daily life certainly has a great deal of connection with our death experience. In the sits today, my heart has been beating so strongly that it has been hard to focus on the meditation subject. I have repeatedly found myself being distracted by it and have then gone back to the meditation subject, but the effort has been great, and I wonder if it would be better to use the heart beating as a subject at this time. Otherwise I feel like I'm fighting myself. A heartbeat is not a good idea as a meditation subject. Be better to do loving kindness at that time. And if it doesn't stop the strong heartbeat, to go for a walk. Does a non-self mean the same thing as the emptiness in the Heart Sutra? I presume it's the Prajna Paramita. Huh? If they don't mean the same thing, what's the difference? Yes, they do mean the same thing. Hard to read. If the meditation, if I feel the transparency in meditation, is it useful, and that was, to put something, for instance, loving kindness, there, or should I remain with the transparency? Definitely with the transparency. What is the difference, if there is any, between the sweeping and the relaxation in yoga, where you relax in the same way all the parts of the body? It is usually done lying on the back. The relaxation in yoga is exactly that, what it says. It's relaxation. And what we do in the part by part is for insight. And I mentioned only the purification aspects of it. The inside aspects are also manifold. And the first one that we can look at is the impermanence of all our feelings and sensations. And immediately we realize that we know only where we put our mind. When we put our mind on a certain sensation, it's there. But when we take the mind away, it's gone. So there is two things that we learn from that. One is the impermanence, and the other one is we don't know anything where we don't put our mind. The Buddha was asked one time whether he was omniscient. And he said, not in a sense of knowing everything all at once. I know that, what I put my mind on. We can experience that ourselves. So that's one of the very important insights that we gain from that method. There's another very important insight that we can gain, and that is we don't have to react. One day we will learn to react only when we want to. Here, if we have an unpleasant or a pleasant sensation or feeling, we let it go in order to get on with the meditation. And there's no reason in the world to blame anyone for the unpleasant sensation. Nobody's done anything. Everybody is concerned with their own meditation. And yet there is a very unpleasant sensation. So learning, first of all, not to react, and secondly, not to blame anyone for all this unpleasantness that goes on within oneself, are two of the most important lessons that we have to learn for our own purification. Purification is inner work. It's not just a word. It's inner work, and it's the one work which is strictly spiritual. There's no materiality connected to it. How we do it, these are methods. Use the ones you like, if you like. So as we do this particular method, we have impermanence, we have the ability to see we only know what we put our mind on, and it disappears if we take our mind away from it. It may even disappear while we're still there, because it's very fleeting. We have the opportunity not to react to anything at all that goes on, and we certainly learn that there's nobody to blame. It just is the way it is. We have another possibility, which we will talk about at another time. We can see from various sensations that this body is very much made up of the same ingredients as everything else. And it will help us, and we will go into that in more detail, and it will help us also to lose a little bit of the sense of this is me. The stronger the sense of this is me, the more righteousness, And the more righteousness, the more there is the possibility of having difficulties with other people. So, and with oneself too. When we see that we're no different from everything around us, that everything that exists within us exists also outside of us as far as materiality is concerned, there's a little bit less self-importance. And if you find a little bit less self-importance, sometimes called very aptly self-cherishing, we may learn to cherish others more. So we have a chance here also to have more of a heart connection with other people. It's a very important factor for a life which is harmonious and balanced, that heart and mind are in balance. We have both. We have the thinking ability, the logic, the analysis, and we have the loving ability. And we have to purify both and develop both in order to have a true way of practicing. If we just practice with the mind, it will never work. A spiritual path, any spiritual discipline, is the closest relationship we can have because it concerns ourselves. Now, if we have a relationship with another person which is strictly built up on mind and has no heart in it, it's not very satisfying. In fact, it's very dry, and it may have only utilitarian results. If we have a relationship with another person which has only heart in it, it's a little better. But if we don't understand that other person at all, it doesn't have a chance to last. We have to understand and love. So our heart connection, when it is helped through any of the methods, will enhance and will anchor the practice. If we can't open our heart, we can't practice. We can know a lot about Buddhism. There are thousands of books these days, and we can read them all if we like. I wouldn't advise it, but one could. But it doesn't do a thing. It just clutters up the mind with all sorts of concepts. But if we actually practice, and this particular method that we're talking about, the part by part, has many of the features that will really change our outlook. And that's what is needed, to change our outlook, but from the depth of feeling and not from the depth of understanding. Meditation is all based on feeling. We have to first understand how to do it, but it's all based on feeling. And enlightenment is based on feeling. If we don't feel it, we're not enlightened. Logic, isn't it? I mean, if we don't feel enlightened, we aren't. But if we imagine we're enlightened, we're in a bad way. Because then we can't learn anything. And then we've blocked the path. The feeling that we get, the sensations that we get in this particular method are geared towards purification and insight. And the purification aspect we have already discussed this morning. And the insights, that tell us more about ourselves will help us to reduce the self-importance, will help us to reduce our feeling of being special. There was a newspaper, a Zen newspaper, where was it? Oh yes, in Australia, and was called Nothing Special. Wonderful name. I don't think they have it anymore. Nothing special. It's all one and the same. And if we can see ourselves part of all that surrounds us, part of all of creation, but nothing special, we have a much easier passage. It can happen in this method. It may not. It may happen through another method. But basically, in answer to the question, it's not a relaxation method, it's a method for insight and purification. And that's also why we don't do it lying down, even though it would be far more comfortable. But because we need the self-discipline to really recognize ourselves, we also need the self-discipline to sit. The two go together. And we have already talked about the difficulties in sitting and how we should deal with them and how we can deal with them in the best way. These are the main aspects of the insights that arise when we do this method more often. I would again suggest that the part by part should be done by everyone at least once a day. And by those who find it difficult to get in touch with their sensations and feelings, by all means, as often as you can possibly bring yourself to do it. If we can't get in touch with our own feelings and sensations, we don't know who we are. We mustn't imagine that there is anyone who hasn't got feelings or sensations. Everybody's got them. But some people find it difficult to get in touch with them. If we get in touch with them and recognize them, we get a better idea of what there is, because also, if we let go of them, which we have to do in order to carry on, we realize that they don't necessarily have to be called mine. It's just an idea that all these feelings and sensations are mine. And we could try and see feeling and sensation as nothing other than feeling or sensation. And maybe discard that idea of mine for a moment. And maybe discard the idea of I am aware of feeling and sensation. And maybe for a moment have that moment of insight where there is nothing other than just feeling or sensation. And when there's nothing other than that, we get a bit of an example of what it can be like when we don't constantly resurrect this idea, this is me. There's just feeling, there's just sensation, and it's already finished. So it can bring quite a lot of insight. It can certainly bring the insight into impermanence. It can, as I've just explained, bring an inkling of insight into non-self. And it certainly can bring an insight into dukkha, because a lot of the sensations are not pleasant. Some are, some aren't. And then we realize nothing is happening. Dukkha just is. And that's what the Buddha said. Dukkha just is. Nothing has to happen. Nobody has to do anything. Nobody has to say anything. We don't have to do anything. We don't even have to think anything. We can just become aware and realize what's going on within the body. And we know there's always dukkha to be found. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and corelessness are the three characteristics of the universe. Anything which has to do with insight, with true insight, refers to one of those three. It has to be in personal experience. Nothing else changes us. Reading about it, hearing about it, even intellectual understanding of it, does not change one's character. One remains as egocentric as one always has been. One changes one's character when the personal experience happens and one recognizes it. Wisdom is the understood experience. You see, we all have the experience, but we don't understand it. We all have the experience that, for instance, our breath is totally impermanent, constantly changing. But do we understand what that means? That we are actually not solid? Everybody in the whole world has that experience, every moment. But does it change their character? Has it made them less egocentric? Has it given them the opening of the heart towards all beings? Nothing of the kind. They continue breathing. That's all. So wisdom is the understood experience. And we have that opportunity in all methods. But this particular method has a fair few extra possibilities for having the personal experience of what is happening within us. We can stand up and stretch our legs.